Oh hey! Sorry about the lighting, but unfortunately at this time of year daylight hours are few and far between, especially this far up north. You know, this is one that I've really been looking forward to, primarily because it's used as a source very frequently in my History of series. I think nearly every single Dalek video probably has this show up somewhere throughout, and I've actually read it before. It was my introduction to this series. So does it hold up to how I remember? Well, let's find out. War of the Daleks is structured as so. We've got a prologue, an epilogue, and 3 interludes sprinkled throughout. Unlike the previous novel, however, the breaks throughout are actually interesting to read, and they're their own self-contained stories that expand the war with the Daleks, making the universe seem bigger. We'll begin with the prologue, which establishes our main cast of Thal's side characters from the perspective of one of them called Ayaka. The Thal race has changed significantly since we last saw them in Planet of the Daleks, seemingly having regressed back to their militaristic total war ways. The entire purpose of their species is now the total eradication of the Daleks, coming from a sense of guilt that they have from partially being the cause of the Daleks' creation. This means that Ayaka is a battle-hardened veteran, despite only being in her 20s. Every Thal is required to have a child before joining the military so that they can continue their species, and after surviving a couple of missions that you're not really expected to, you're considered a veteran. She has a policy of not talking to her squad mates until they've survived at least 2 missions, so as to not create an attachment that potentially couldn't last very long. Despite her deep sense of duty, Ayaka still has some compassion left in her, unlike her squad leader Dione, who just puts the mission first. The Thals have essentially brought the Daleks to the primitive world of Arrakis, amassing a sizable force there to make the Daleks think that it's of strategic importance. So of course, the Daleks send everything they have at it, the entire 8th Dalek fleet. But then the entire planet explodes, taking the fleet with it and all of the natives down on the planet. Ayaka is rightfully absolutely distraught at how they can just kill an entire species, an entire planet like that, but Dione simply just waves it away. The fact is that if they didn't do it, the Daleks would have just killed the entire planet anyway, so having the Daleks be destroyed and the planet be destroyed is a plus. Therefore, the ends justify the means. Or do they? The Thals were the ones who pulled the trigger. They're the ones that made the Daleks think this world was of strategic importance. They brought them there. At what point are you just killing the people you're trying to save from your enemy? The first interlude is titled Human Space, and is by far my favourite. It follows the story of space security agent Drin Faber as he blows up an underwater Dalek drill on the planet of Antolin. The SSS, or Triple S, is something that we haven't seen since their introduction in the Daleks' Master Plan, and outside of a couple of side appearances at Big Finish and of course Dalek Universe, I'm surprised that we haven't seen Triple S more in the main series. As I said, this one is by far my favourite, as it's just such a cool little piece. It's agents like Drin that are essentially one-man armies fighting against the Daleks on the front lines. Similar to the next interlude titled Draconian Space, where we have a fleet of Draconian battlecruisers fighting against the Daleks. What this one does really well is make us feel something for ultimately rather meaningless characters. They have no real bearing on the story, but it doesn't make their deaths any less heart-wrenching. So far, 3 species are fighting against the Daleks, the Thals, the humans, and Draconians, and with the Mechanoids starring in the final interlude, Hesperus, that makes 4. The Mechanoid interlude is in my opinion the weakest of the 3, but it's still very good, showcasing the brutality of the Daleks and the pure logic of the Mechanoids. They're just robots following their programming after all, though I will give it credits for its final line. A spider Dalek scuttled forward before 179 could realign its flamethrower. The blaster on the spider spat, and Mechon 179 sensors reported a serious rupture in its integument. Critical systems had been damaged, and total systems failure was expected momentarily. Mechon 179 sent a final message to Central Computer to inform it that another Mechon unit would have to be assigned to check on the insect infestation on the geraniums tomorrow. Then, its systems crashed. So, if that's the prologue and interludes, what's the main plot? Well, the Doctor is finally fixing his TARDIS, more specifically the lock on his door, and since this is something that can't be performed in the Vortex, the TARDIS is picked up by the Quetzal, a salvage ship. One of the crew members is the engineer Cheyenne, and her character presents the only issue that I have with this story, which for some reason has also been in the previous 2 stories. Ridiculous romance / over-sexualization. Here, kinda thankfully, it's more on the ridiculous romance side of things. Here's a quote from Cheyenne. She moved to turn off the comp, but the doctor stopped her. It felt rather nice to have him touch her, but this was neither the time nor the place to explore that. What the hell is this doing here? The first 60 pages are just full of unnecessary lines about who likes who's into who's probably going to get married to who, and also for some reason Sam worrying about other women taking the doctor away from her. Might I remind you at this point, she's 17. This is where we have to talk about the writer, John Peel, and I don't mean John Peel, the radio DJ. Yet, for some reason, every time I'd hear someone make a joke about John Peel on, like, have I got news for you or something like that, I'd always assume they meant the writer John Peel, since I didn't know there was a radio DJ called John Peel, though it makes sense as I don't think that this guy is famous enough to be mentioned on a panel show. Peel is prominent for two things. The first is that he wrote the initial novel of the Virgin New Adventures range, being Timewyrm Genesys, an apparently awful novel, famous, or should I say infamous for its adult language and adult themes, and second, being one of the few early Dalek writers, writing target novelizations of the 60s stories and even a history of the Daleks with Terry Nation himself. So when it came to bringing the Daleks back for the Eighth Doctor, Peel was an obvious choice, even if his more recent novel wasn't particularly well received. And for the most part, Peel is quite good, especially when it comes to the continuity of the Daleks, though in places their dialogue does just feel a bit off. For a Dalek story, this has everything that I could possibly want. A deep expansion into the Dalek lore, Davros written quite accurately, Daleks fighting each other, and of course, Dalek Prime. Yet one area of this story has caused some controversy, and that's a semi-soft retcon of all the Dalek stories preceding it. As this is set post-Remembrance of the Daleks, of course the last Dalek story to be released, Davros believes that Skaro is gone, reduced to atoms. But he, and the Doctor for that matter, are shocked to find out that not only is the Dalek race thriving, but Skaro is actually not destroyed, it's still there. So how do they do it? Well, Peel has an answer for bringing them back. During their invasion of Earth in the 22nd century, while looking in the Ministry of Defence's vaults, they found a peculiar entry on Dalek sightings in 1963, the Shoreditch incident. These records show that Davros destroyed Skaro in 1963, so of course they try to change history by using time travel. This is what we see in Day of the Daleks. Of course it doesn't particularly go very well there, and shows them that they can't save their homeworld by changing history, so another plan must be devised. They come up with a plan to save Skaro not by changing history, but just by changing the universe's perception of it. They terraform the planet of Antolin to become a new Skaro, not Antolin from the interlude, a different Antolin. Peel got his notes mixed up. They move Davros, who is at this point still in suspended animation from getting shot by Dalek Prime in Genesis of the Daleks, to the new Skaro on Antolin, and then to top it all off, created the Movellans to give a good reason as to why they needed to revive Davros. The Doctor kind of interferes here in Destiny of the Daleks, which turns out to actually be good, as it reinforces in Davros's mind that the Movellan threat is real, and this is the real Skaro that he's on, even if it clearly does not look like the same planet. Davros is then captured, broken out by the Daleks, and given access to time travel technology so he can make it to 1963. Thing is, the plan starts going a bit wrong, as Davros creates his own faction of the Daleks. But everything still goes according to plan, as the renegade Daleks, led by Dalek Prime, ensure that Davros and his Imperial Daleks get the hand of Omega. Then they destroy Antolin, and Bob's your uncle, he's inadvertently saved Skaro, making Davros, the Doctor, and the rest of the universe believe that Skaro's been completely and totally destroyed. Personally, I don't think it's too complicated to follow like a lot of people say. There is an unnecessary part of this story where the Dalek factory ship seen on Vulcan is actually from this period, even though the Dalek casings don't really line up, as at the end of the story the Doctor jettisons a Dalek factory ship into the time vortex, seemingly lost to the time winds, but he believes that maybe he solved it in his past. Meaning every story with the Daleks in it has some level of detail added to it. It's like an endgame to the entire series. The Doctor recalls the events of the Daleks, Genesis, and Remembrance. The previously mentioned stories are talked about by Dalek Prime himself, And the human space interlude relates to the Daleks' master plan, the Draconian space to Frontier in Space, and of course Hesperus to the chase. So what relevance does this have on every single story that will come after this? Absolutely none whatsoever. The Daleks in the next novel, Legacy of the Daleks, are not from this period. They're from after the 2150 invasion. They're the remnants of the force that was on Earth. And the revived series nor the TV movie ever make any attempt at an explanation of why Skaro still exists. Anyway, back to the plot itself. The Quetzal crew, Thals, and the TARDIS team are taken to a very much intact Skaro, where the Doctor meets Dalek Prime and watches Davros's trial. After the Civil War, the only thing that Dalek Prime wants is to put Davros on trial for his crimes against the Dalek race, but that's only what's on the surface. The true trial is of the Dalek race themselves, whether or not they are fit to continue as they are, and that will be decided through death and destruction. Dalek Prime wants to win totally against Davros, and the only way he can do that is by having another civil war, the namesake War of the Daleks. Only then can he finally discredit Davros completely, and also kill all of the Daleks that are still loyal to him, I guess. So why keep the Doctor and the rest of them alive? Well, he needs a guarantee that Davros at the end of this will be dead, and if he can't do it, then the Doctor will be forced to, and if the Doctor doesn't do it, well, then all of his friends will die. Simple. My favourite character of the novel, and really Doctor Who in general, will always be Dalek Prime. Peel really knows how to write him as an effective villain. The leader of the Daleks is always such an interesting concept, and Davros only serves to add to that. Why should this one Dalek be the leader? What puts him above the rest of them? If Daleks are the supreme beings of the universe, second to none, then why are some Daleks more supreme than others? This is the point that Davros brings to his trial, and he states that he doesn't have this problem because he's their creator. By default, he should be their leader, as all Daleks are created equally, and he is not a Dalek. But Prime can easily clap back with, "You didn't create us, you just accelerated an ongoing genetic process." It's a bit like a table tennis debate. This brings us to another thing that I really like, which is Peel setting out the Dalek hierarchy. You have Dalek Prime at the top, under him are the Gold Daleks, acting as his inner circle. Then you've got the Black Daleks, which take the role of commanding officers, then the Red Daleks, who are the officers, the Blue Daleks, who are the NCOs, and right at the bottom you've got the Grey Daleks, who are the enlisted. Where Davros mainly has his support base is in the lower ranks. It's like an uprising from the bottom up, so I guess just an uprising. He has a moderate support base among the Blues and some among the Reds, but from then on there's only a couple of Black Daleks and none of the Golds. After all, they stand to lose a lot more power in the hierarchy if Davros loses. They don't want to hedge their bets in the wrong direction, and they've already got a pretty comfortable position. Dalek Prime, on the other hand, has control over the elites, the Golds, most of the Blacks, and still a majority of the Dalek army. The odds are tipped in his favour. Overall, I will say that I really enjoy this novel and what it does. The lore of the Daleks themselves, how they're written. When you strip it back, there's not really much that I can fault it on. Peel really knows what he's doing here. My only gripes are of course the unneeded romance, and that sometimes the Daleks' dialogue doesn't feel right. There's some lines where I think, I can't imagine a Dalek saying that, or it just doesn't go right in my head. It might just be me. Which is why I'm giving War of the Daleks a 9 out of 10. The best that we've come across so far, even if a lot of people, or well, most people, probably wouldn't agree with me. If you are to read any as a jumping on point for the EDAs that isn't the earlier ones, this is definitely a good place to start. A familiar villain and a Doctor-companion relationship that's still being properly thought out. We're not quite there yet. But next time, I have a slight feeling that this one will be dethroned as number 1 in my mind, as we take a dive into the Lawrence Miles epic Alien Bodies. I'll see you then.